Hey everyone, buckle up because today's case is one of the most disturbing we've covered. A chilling mix of family, faith gone horribly wrong, and a life-saving cry for help that went unanswered. I'm taking you to Manaus, deep in the Brazilian Amazon, where a successful businesswoman's polished facade hid a terrifying reality. Let's get started. At dawn on May 28, 2024, panic was setting in for Gigi Cardoso's family in Manaus, the capital of Brazil's Amazonas state. She hadn't responded to messages or calls for over a day. Fear mounting, her relatives knew waiting wasn't an option. By 6 a.m., they stood outside her home in a quiet residential neighborhood. Behind locked gates, an unsettling silence hung in the air. Knocks went unanswered. Forced to take action, they entered. Gigi's brother, Ademar Farias, opened the door. He looked visibly on edge. Inside were Gigi's mother, Gigi Cardoso, along with several employees from Gigi's beauty salon chain. When the family walked into the room where Gigi was lying, they froze. She was motionless, tucked under a blanket. The responses to their questions were vague and evasive. She's resting. It's part of a spiritual process. But one thing was painfully clear. Gigi wasn't alive. Shocked, her relatives immediately contacted emergency services. Investigators quickly arrived, and within the first few hours of examining the scene and Gigi's condition, serious suspicions began to arise. Despite clear signs of a critical state, Gigi had never been taken to a hospital. Her family later stated that in the days leading up to her passing, she had been bedridden, wearing adult care products, severely swollen, and struggling to even speak in short sentences. That day marked the beginning of the official criminal investigation into what happened, an inquiry that would uncover a troubling sequence of events leading to the tragedy. But in that moment, standing in a bedroom with Gigi's lifeless body, surrounded by silence and a strange emotional disconnect, her loved ones had only one question: what really happened here? Gigi Cardoso, whose real name was Dilimar Cardoso Carlos da Silva, was born and raised in Manaus, in the state of Amazonas, Brazil. She rose to fame through her role in the traditional Boi-Bumbá Festival, where she performed as the Sinhazinha da Fazenda, the central female figure of the Garantido team. The festival holds deep cultural significance in the region and brings public recognition to its performers. Gigi was admired for her charisma and deep respect for local traditions. She radiated confidence and stage presence. After stepping away from the festival, Gigi shifted her focus to entrepreneurship and entered the beauty industry. She launched a chain of salons in her hometown and quickly gained a reputation as a successful businesswoman. Her prior fame helped draw in clients, and her active social media presence amplified her brand. She regularly posted promotional content and personal updates related to beauty treatments, wellness, and self-care. Her lifestyle and appearance were portrayed as the results of determination, discipline, and constant self-improvement. Gigi was known for being composed and driven. Friends, clients, and followers saw her as a modern role model, someone who had built a thriving business doing what she loved. Yet little was known about her personal life. She kept her family and business world separate, maintaining an image that was professional, polished, and somewhat enigmatic. According to those close to her, the relationships between Gigi, her mother Gigi Cardoso, and her brother Ademar Farias were, until recently, described as neutral and mostly businesslike. Gigi occasionally appeared in social media posts, while Ademar stayed mostly out of the public eye. Outwardly, the family didn't seem to be in conflict. They all lived together in the same house, and from the outside, things appeared orderly. Before 2023, there were no known issues with the law or concerns about Gigi's mental health. Neither friends nor salon staff had ever reported troubling behavior or potential dependencies. On the contrary, Gigi came across as someone entirely focused on her career. Her salon brand relied heavily on her personal image. Her professionalism built trust, which in turn strengthened the business. However, in later conversations, some relatives admitted no one ever imagined that what unfolded in that household would later become part of a criminal investigation. On the night before the incident, several people were inside Gigi Cardoso's home. her mother, brother, former partner, Bruno Roberto, and staff from her beauty salon chain. The atmosphere was tense and disconnected. Gigi appeared weak and physically diminished, while the general mood in the house felt detached from reality. Parts of what happened that night were recorded by Bruno Roberto. The first video was filmed at 11:40 p.m. on May 27th. In the footage, Gigi is seen holding a ketamine bottle in one hand and a syringe in the other. Bruno is heard asking her to put everything down and not take another dose. Gigi doesn't respond. Her facial expressions and movements suggest she was already under the strong effects of a psychoactive substance. The next recording is from about 30 minutes later. Gigi is now lying in bed, searching for the syringe cap. Bruno speaks to her in a frustrated tone, urging her to stop and get some rest. He claims he tried to help, but that she doesn't want to stop. Gigi replies that she's planning to take another dose. In the background, the rest of the people in the house appear detached and unresponsive. Bruno's behavior leaves a mixed impression. While his words suggest concern, his actions show passivity. He doesn't try to intervene. Instead, he keeps recording, as if documenting a moment rather than reacting to an unfolding emergency. That night, Gigi made several remarks about taking a journey or leaving for another plane. This language reflected the family's belief system, one that held that ketamine could open gateways to alternate realities. Even when signs of overdose became impossible to ignore, neither her mother, nor her brother, nor Bruno, nor the salon staff called for medical help. The next morning, Bruno told others he had found Gigi unresponsive. Still in the house were Clusimar, Adamar, and at least 2 salon staff members. It would later be confirmed that she had passed around 2 a.m., but even as her condition deteriorated, none of the people present reached out for professional assistance. Instead, they continued with what appeared to be a deeply misguided spiritual ritual, ignoring every sign that Gigi needed urgent medical care. According to the family's account, Gigi hadn't died. She had temporarily left her body, claiming it was part of a spiritual practice. They believed she would awaken within 4 hours. When that didn't happen, they carried her outside into the sunlight, insisting that the morning rays would bring her soul back. She was later returned indoors. These actions created a false reality, while clinical signs showed her condition was irreversible. The videos recorded by Bruno later became central to the police investigation. These clips captured the crucial moments when things could have turned out differently. Gigi Cardoso's passing wasn't sudden. It was the result of inaction and a refusal to accept reality. That night marked a turning point in what became a criminal case, sparking public outcry, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of the complete absence of basic responsibility from those around her. A month before Gigi Cardoso's death, her relatives contacted law enforcement, claiming she was being kept inside her home against her will. On April 24, 2024, officers from the Manaus Civil Police responded to a call. The concern was over Gigi's rapidly declining condition and the repeated refusal to allow even close family members into the house. By then, Gigi had stopped answering calls, hadn't been seen leaving the house, and according to relatives, was no longer able to walk on her own. Officers were greeted by Clusimar, Gigi's mother. She insisted that Gigi was doing fine and didn't need any help. When one officer asked to see Gigi's room, they encountered a locked door. Footage from the scene captured a tense exchange between Clusimar and one of the officers. She insisted her daughter wasn't being held against her will and claimed the officers didn't have legal grounds to enter without a warrant. The recording ends just as one officer approaches the door where Gigi was believed to be. What happened next wasn't documented, but the outcome was clear. No further action was taken. According to the family, Gigi spoke briefly with the officers and declined to leave. However, it remains unclear what condition she was in during that supposed conversation. Relatives didn't give up. They created a WhatsApp group called Salvamento da Gigi, or Saving Gigi. It included family members and others who had previously noticed worrying changes in her behavior. Their goal was to get Gigi out of the house and into a clinic for emergency detox, but the plan was never carried out. Relatives feared legal consequences. Clusimar held her ground, and the police didn't have the legal tools to intervene. Previous attempts to help Gigi had also failed, met each time with silence and denial. The house became like a fortress. From a legal standpoint, the situation appeared to be this. An adult woman was living in her home by choice, had not reported any mistreatment, and wasn't asking for help. On paper, there was no clear violation. This episode exposed serious flaws in the response system. Even with visible signs of severe dependency, mental instability, and physical deterioration, official procedures outweighed basic logic. Her loved ones were left powerless. April 24th would be the last documented visit by law enforcement to Gigi's home. None of those trying to help took further legal steps. No one contacted the district attorney's office or called emergency medical services again. Gigi never escaped the closed loop she was trapped in. A month later, she passed, without ever receiving the help she so clearly needed. The failed attempt to rescue Gigi Cardoso revealed just how helpless even the closest people can be when facing a rigid system. Even in a situation where a person's life was clearly at risk, the law remained blind to the harsh realities of substance dependency. The police followed protocol, and, in the cold balance between regulation and detachment, the life of a determined young woman came to a tragic end. After the investigation began, police discovered that the Cardoso household in Manaus was operating under a loosely structured group with cult-like characteristics. It was called Pi My Vida, which translates from Portuguese to Father, Mother, Life. The name appeared in rituals and symbols, including tattoos worn by some members. Behind it was a pseudo-religious belief system combining mysticism, distorted spiritual practices, and the normalization of psychoactive substance use. The ideology was promoted by Ademar Farias. According to authorities, he had been introduced to similar concepts during treatment for substance dependency in the United Kingdom. After returning to Brazil, he began pushing the idea of a spiritual transition, allegedly attainable through ritual use of mind-altering substances. His mother, Cleusimar Cardoso, eventually joined him and assumed control over what took place inside the home and within their so-called community. Cleusimar emerged as the dominant figure. She was the one who decided who would take substances and when. She claimed to possess a unique ability to restore energy through what she called light sessions. These rituals took place both at home and in rooms that had once operated as Gigi Cardoso's beauty salons. Attendees included staff members who were drawn into what the group described as spiritual practices. The group used a distinctive style of language, religious terminology, altered quotes from a series of books known as Cartas de Cristo, and invented purification formulas. During searches of the property, law enforcement discovered vials of ketamine, syringes, needles, and handwritten instructions for soul restoration. These findings pointed to a level of organization and intent far beyond what was previously assumed. The group had a strict hierarchy. Cleusimar made all final decisions. Ademar, her son, acted as the interpreter of messages and led separate sessions. Gigi, despite her visibly declining health, remained involved. On paper, she was participating voluntarily, but her condition strongly suggested otherwise. Ketamine played a structured role in the group's operations. It was administered in carefully measured doses, using insulin syringes, indicating some basic medical knowledge among participants. The substance was sourced from veterinary clinics, where it could be obtained without a prescription. Authorities confirmed that these acquisitions were routine. One of the most notable aspects of the group was its isolation. Members restricted outside access, denied entry to relatives, and tightly controlled any flow of information beyond their inner circle. Visitors were expected to follow energy rules. Those who disagreed were labeled as spiritually underdeveloped and excluded. Dissent was not tolerated. This was effectively a system of psychological control operating behind the facade of family and business. It had its own rules, hierarchy, rituals, substance protocols, and a belief structure that disguised dependency as enlightenment. This pseudo-spiritual setup became the backdrop against which Gigi's life unraveled, and possibly others as well. The initial use of psychoactive substances in the Cardoso household had little to do with spiritual beliefs. According to relatives, it all began with a desire to change their physical appearance. Gigi and her brother Ademar believed they had gained excess weight, and were determined to transform their bodies quickly. This led them to connect with a man named Athos Silveira, who presented himself as a personal trainer. Later, it was discovered that he held no license or verifiable qualifications in fitness or health coaching. According to the investigation, Athos was the one who introduced the family to injectable anabolic substances, often referred to casually as bombs. He personally administered the injections, explaining how to use them and what dosages to apply. Both Gigi and Adhemar participated. Eventually, their mother, Clusimar, joined the routine as well. The regular use of these enhancers soon became a daily habit. None of the family members were under medical supervision. The substances were not officially prescribed or regulated in any way. According to relatives, this was the point when the family took its first step toward the regular use of prohibited substances. At first, anabolic enhancers weren't seen as dangerous. They were simply viewed as a shortcut to achieving a desired body image. Over time, any sense of caution faded, while the willingness to experiment grew stronger. Adhemar soon began promoting ketamine as something he believed could expand consciousness. Having already used injectable enhancers, it was a short leap for him from performance substances to a new chemical. He introduced ketamine to Gigi, who, according to investigators, was under his influence at the time. Before long, she too became involved. Clusimar, who had already been part of the earlier experimentation, joined in without hesitation. The substance quickly became part of their routine. Initially, ketamine was taken in microdoses in liquid form. Later, a family acquaintance claimed the effects could be intensified through subcutaneous injections using insulin syringes. From that point on, the usage became more structured and systematic. The home was soon stocked with vials and other supplies. By then, Gigi and her family were administering the substance on a set schedule in a controlled setting. Injections were performed in a specific sequence, each tied to a purpose. Rituals began to form around these sessions, involving close associates and some salon staff. What was once a medical and veterinary anesthetic was now entering the household through unofficial channels. At one point, there was even talk of opening a veterinary clinic to legitimize access to the drug. This idea was reportedly discussed by Adhemar, Clusimar, and others. Later on, staff from an operating veterinary clinic were named in the investigation. It was through this facility, according to authorities, that the family sourced the substance. As regular use became the norm, the dynamic inside the family shifted. Decisions were made in an increasingly insular environment, and any attempt to intervene from the outside was viewed as a threat. Daily routines, conversations, and long-term goals began revolving entirely around the substance. People who once lived socially active lives were now completely absorbed in a lifestyle dictated by dependency, masked as spiritual or ideological growth. What began as a seemingly harmless desire to improve physical appearance progressed through anabolic experiments and culminated in frequent ketamine use. Each person became involved gradually, but with each passing day, the involvement deepened. Chemistry became a daily fixture, and the focus shifted from controlling the body to the illusion of controlling the mind. In June 2023, 82-year-old Maria Vanina, mother of Clusimar Cardoso and grandmother of Gigi, passed away in the city of Parintins in the state of Amazonas. Her death occurred during the traditional Boi-Bumbá Festival. At the time, Clusimar, Adhemar, and Gigi were all in town, staying at Maria's home. The elderly woman had been in fragile condition for a while, with age, chronic health conditions, and prolonged emotional distress all taking a toll on her well-being. At the time of the tragedy, only 3 people were in the house. Other relatives who had previously lived with Maria Vanina were reportedly asked to leave so they wouldn't interfere with a healing ritual that Clusimar intended to perform in a small, private setting. During this ritual, the elderly woman was given injectable substances previously used within the family. Preliminary findings suggest these were the same anabolic compounds that had been introduced earlier. The procedure was presented as a method to restore life energy. The participants believed that the combination of these substances with specific actions could improve one's condition or even lead to full recovery. However, During the session, Maria Vanina lost consciousness. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. No medical help was called. Everything unfolded behind closed doors, without doctors or outside witnesses. According to relatives later interviewed by police, Klusimar claimed she had the ability to bring her mother back through prayer and intense spiritual focus. Even after the burial, Klusimar insisted that a return was still possible, allegedly through invoking higher powers. These claims deeply concerned family members, but at that time, there were no formal grounds for legal action. The death had been recorded as natural. This event marked the first known episode. It was during this time that elements of what would later become the Pi My Vida group began to emerge. Within this circle, Klusimar took on a leadership role. Her word became final, not just in spiritual matters, but in decisions that directly affected the lives of others. Later, family members suggested that Maria Vanina's passing may have been caused by the substances administered to her. However, there was no supporting evidence at the time, and the case was not pursued legally. An official investigation was launched only a year later, following Gigi's death, when authorities began connecting the dots between the two incidents and examining the family's internal dynamics. This earlier episode had gone unnoticed by both law enforcement and the public until the larger picture came to light. It became clear that the grandmother's passing wasn't just a tragic accident, but potentially the first consequence of a belief system that blurred the lines between spiritual rhetoric and dangerous disconnection from reality. Gigi Cardoso's beauty salon chain had maintained a strong reputation right up until the very end. Clients came in, employees worked their shifts, and social media posts kept up the illusion of normalcy with polished photos and videos. However, some of the employees were not merely observers, they were active participants. One of the key witnesses was makeup artist Claudia Les Santos da Silva. She was later placed under house arrest with an electronic monitor, as she had a young daughter under her care. Claudia stated that she had visited Gigi's home multiple times and witnessed her in extremely poor condition, unable to walk, barely responsive, and severely physically weakened. Trying to help, Claudia washed and styled her hair but didn't go further, fearing she might lose her job. The investigation confirmed that Klusimar and Adamar not only oversaw the rituals, but also controlled the business. Staff were dependent on their decisions. Schedules, payments, client assignments, even the ability to remain employed, all hinged on showing loyalty. Disagreement came with the risk of being dismissed. On the surface, the salons continued operating until May 2024. Clients had no idea anything was wrong. Appointments were kept, and everything appeared orderly. But behind the scenes, some of the rooms were occasionally used for sessions involving controlled substances, organized by the same individuals who conducted the so-called rituals. Some staff members were invited to participate under the guise of energy practices. While refusal wasn't explicitly punished, it often led to a noticeable drop in trust and opportunities. Investigators concluded that the salons had become part of a broader structure of influence. They weren't just financing the inner circle. They had become tools of control and dependency. During interviews, police also spoke with employees who were not directly involved in the rituals. Many admitted they suspected something unusual was going on, but didn't feel they had the right or the courage to intervene. One employee said, "Everyone felt it wasn't normal, but they were afraid to ask questions." Emotional pressure, unspoken rules, and the group's secrecy created a system of silence. The head of the investigative team later stated that this setup allowed a belief-based cult to exist within a functioning legal business. The salon had stopped being just a place for services. It had become part of a closed system where both chemical and psychological dependency were normalized. After Gigi Cardoso's death, her former partner, Bruno Roberto, positioned himself as an outsider. But one detail cast doubt on his neutrality: a tattoo bearing the words Pi My Vida, the same phrase used by the group as a symbolic motto, which appeared on the bodies of other participants. This strongly suggested his ideological alignment with the group, regardless of whether he openly participated in rituals. Regarding his passive role the night Gigi passed away, Bruno claimed he tried to stop her, but that she wouldn't listen. He insisted he stayed by her side out of personal attachment. However, considering Gigi's clearly impaired state, where she couldn't reasonably make informed decisions, his stance seemed more like an attempt to deflect responsibility. Another suspicious moment involved Gigi's car. After her death, Bruno used the vehicle, allegedly, to attend the funeral. But instead, he abandoned it by the side of a city street. Investigators traced the car's movements and questioned why he had left it without explanation. Bruno blamed a mechanical issue, but within the broader investigation, this raised suspicions. It may have been an attempt to dispose of evidence or create a distraction. Bruno's legal team maintained that he was unaware of the group's full activities. However, analysis of his phone revealed frequent contact with Ademar Farias and Athos Silveira. Investigators confirmed that the three were connected and that Bruno had visited the Cardoso home multiple times, including during gatherings later classified as ritual sessions involving banned substances. One lead investigator said bluntly, Bruno could not have been unaware of what was happening inside the home. His presence, while perhaps not as an organizer, was consistent and documented at critical points. Notably, he spent the night there the day Gigi passed away. Ultimately, Bruno was detained on June 7th, along with Athos Silveira. Both were charged with providing false statements. Investigators found discrepancies between their testimony and digital evidence, text messages, geolocation data, and device content. These contradictions allowed investigators to uncover an entire criminal operation that combined elements of occult, unlawful medical activity, and substance trafficking. Arrests of key individuals began, and the hidden structure finally started to unravel. By the time the suspects were taken into custody, they already knew they were under surveillance. On the day law enforcement arrived to execute the arrest warrants, the house showed clear signs of a planned escape. Bags packed, devices turned off, and missing documents. However, the police acted swiftly, and the suspects were detained before they could put their escape plans into motion. Among those arrested were also employees from the beauty salons, believed by investigators to have participated in organizing the rituals and distributing ketamine. The charges included unlawful possession and distribution of psychoactive substances, participation in a criminal enterprise, and conducting ritualistic practices in violation of Brazilian law. A central focus of the investigation was the ketamine supply chain. Authorities discovered that the primary source led to a veterinary clinic in Manaus. One of the key suspects was José Máximo Silva de Oliveira, the clinic's owner. His name appeared in the arrest warrant, and a few days after the operation began, he voluntarily turned himself in. According to investigators, the clinic was not only distributing ketamine without proper veterinary prescriptions, but also storing other controlled substances that later ended up in the hands of members of the inner group. During the search, documents were seized that confirmed an ongoing relationship between the clinic and the Cardoso family. In this way, the beauty salons became tools for financing and supporting underground activity. Investigators characterized this as part of a larger system where a legitimate business, spiritual rhetoric, and the illegal trade of substances merged into a single structure, controlling both money and people. Further confirmation of the scale and organization came with the arrest of 2 staff members from the same veterinary clinic. One was suspected of actively supplying substances to group members, while the other was believed to have destroyed records and concealed evidence. The operation functioned on 3 levels: consumers, the Cardoso family and close associates, intermediaries, Athos Silveira and salon staff, and suppliers, the veterinary clinic. Based on this structure, police formally classified the network as a criminal organization. Investigators also focused on the group's ideological front, noting that the supposed spiritual movement was more of a cover than a genuine belief system. Thus, the Gigi Cardoso case evolved from a private tragedy into a high-profile criminal case that exposed a large, organized network operating under the guise of a spiritual community. According to the police, the organization had functioned for several years, operating unnoticed by authorities while presenting itself as a successful and socially respectable business. In June 2023, a year before the tragic events, law enforcement in Amazonas had already begun preliminary operations aimed at monitoring the group known as Pi My Vida. However, only after Gigi's death did the focus shift to the substance-related aspects of their activities. In December 2024, a court in Manaus delivered its verdict. Based on the evidence presented, each of the convicted individuals received a sentence of 10 years, 11 months, and 8 days in a high-security facility, along with a fine of 70,270 Brazilian reais per person, amounting to roughly $500,000 reais in total. The sentence was handed down by Judge Celso Souza de Paula, who presides over the third court for drug-related crimes in the state of Amazonas. Some defendants, including Bruno, were granted the right to appeal while remaining free. However, most of the group was already in custody by the time the verdict was announced. The court rejected the defense's argument that the use of substances was voluntary and part of a personal search. Judge de Paula ruled that the case involved systemic exploitation, manipulation, and abuse of trust under the guise of spiritual practice. This ruling marked the conclusion of the main phase of the investigation, but it also raised lingering questions. Were there additional participants who slipped under the radar? And could similar groups be operating in other cities under the appearance of spiritual or self-help movements? Even after the high-profile trial concluded, the case of Gigi Cardoso remained in the public spotlight. A cloud of pressure and distrust lingered over those previously associated with the family, especially individuals believed to have had direct ties to the group. One of the most difficult outcomes affected Claudia Les Santos da Silva, who was among those detained during the initial wave of arrests. She was released on supervised terms as she had a young daughter under her care. However, following her arrest, the child's father took custody and refused to return her, claiming Claudia posed a potential risk. This led to a legal battle, with Claudia fighting to regain parental rights. The case was further complicated by unresolved allegations involving the use of prohibited substances. The public reacted with shock. Online discussions continued to express disbelief that a structure resembling a spiritual cult could operate inside a family home, violating both legal and moral boundaries. In response, authorities in the state of Amazonas launched inquiries into other establishments that may have used psychoactive substances under the guise of therapy or spiritual awakening. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. See you soon.